All right, hello, today's August 12th, 2020. My name is Cristian Doña Rebeco. I am interviewing Alberto Varas for the Conversaciones Oral History Project, Voces of a Pandemic Project at the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies and Chris Library at UNO. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Mr. Varas, that this interview will be placed in the University of Nebraska at Omaha Dr. C.C. and Mabel L. Chris Library, and share with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there's anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there's something you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because we're not conducting this interview in person, I need to record your consent. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. There are several questions we need to make sure you agree to before we go on. The Office of Latino and Latin American Studies and Chris Library wishes to archive your interview along with any other photographs and other documentation at the University of Nebraska at Omaha Dr. C.C. and Mabel L. Chris Library. UNO's Chris Library will retain copyright of the interview and any other materials you donate to the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. First question, do you give the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies consent to archive your interview and your materials at UNO's Chris Library?
Yes.
Do you grant UNO's Chris Library right title and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes.
Do you agree to allow UNO's Chris Library to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes.
Do you grant the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies consent to share your interview and your materials with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voces of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes.
We have many questions in the pre-interview form that we have already filled out. We use that information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends it to the Benson Library and to the Chris Library, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members so that it will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at the Benson Library and Chris Library. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at the Benson?
Yes.
On occasion, the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies and Voces receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with journalists?
Yes. Email.
Okay. Only email then. Perfect. Okay. So thank you, Albert, for accepting to participate in this oral history project. Our goal is to describe the narratives and experiences of Latinos during COVID-19. Before we, or as a way of introduction, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, Cristian. Mi nombre es Alberto Varas. My name is Albert Varas. A little bit of background on me. From Miami, Florida, born and raised to 2 Cuban immigrant parents. And I lived a life of just tremendous opportunity, being born into the family that I was, although we did not, were not rich in resources. We were rich with love and a very strong family upbringing, very multi-generational upbringing where my grandparents were integral in my life. And I feel tremendous pride and privilege in having grown up the way that I did. I'm surrounded by loving, caring adults. I'm the youngest. I have 2 older, wonderful sisters. And my sisters and I and my mom, we all pursued, careers in education. You know, I was formerly a classroom special ed teacher in middle and high school, and have been able to transition out of the classroom and work in nonprofits and to, be able to do more non-traditional community education. I'm married. My wife is a principal of an elementary school in town, and we have two wonderful kids.
So you grew up in Florida, and then you moved to go to college here in Nebraska. How's that move?
Yeah, it was a tremendous culture shock to go from Miami-Dade County, 305, in a environment and an ecosystem with tremendous diversity of people, language, culture, food, high population density. South Florida, it's like a city that spans 3 counties. So going from that type of surrounding to a small liberal arts college in a town of, I think there was like 25,000 people in the whole town, was such a culture shock. Yet it was fascinating to experience the difference between everything that I knew and everything, and my current surroundings. So where I received a football scholarship, and I went up with several teammates from my high school, and there were several athletes from different parts of the country, from large urban areas, DC, Cleveland, LA, where everybody didn't feel the same, I guess, curiosity that I had for the new surroundings. So I found it just very interesting to become friends with individuals that grew up entirely different than I did. To this day, one of my best friends from college is a farm kid that graduated with like 15 people and went to like a K-12 school with like 50 people. And I found it so interesting to see all of the differences in the way that I grew up versus he grew up, but then all of the same similarities of the tight-knit family, and the value system, the belief system. I grew up in a conservative Cuban household, and going to a small liberal arts college in the Midwest. It was, a lot of the kids grew up similar that I did in terms of parents that were very conservative. So I found that to be very interesting, and I loved it. I really enjoyed visiting, going home with my friends over a long weekend, spending a Thanksgiving or an Easter with friends in a household that is, just very different than mine. But I found that there were more similarities than there were differences. So I really enjoyed that that viewpoint. However, I will add that after, every winter, I was questioning my decision, because that's one thing that really didn't sit well with me. Was the winters in Miami were 70 degrees. The winters in Nebraska, was 0 degrees. So that was one of the things that I never acclimated to, and I was ready to return to Florida, once I graduated.
Which you need to work in a school, right? Before going all the way into community organizations, you work in a school in Miami, and then you decided to come back to Omaha.
I did, and what brought me back, I was supposed to be, I was visiting friends in the summer, and then I met a beautiful young woman that was also a teacher. We were both special ed teachers at the time. We dated long distance for some months, and a few months in, I was like, okay, we need to, be closer together. This long distance stuff is for the birds. So I made a decision to move out here for what was supposed to be 10 months. She was finishing grad school, and I was going to be here for 10 months. She was going to finish grad school, and we were going to move back to Florida and resume, life, on the beach and just the warmth and the multicultural and all that good stuff. But then I ended up in working at a nonprofit that was doing non-traditional education um, and in program development and program coordination, and kind of saw a different side of education and saw what could be possible when philanthropy, and resources pair up with schools and students, and seeing the outcomes that can be achieved when that partnership is strong. And 10 months I was like, okay, let's just see where this goes. Let's stay here for another year. And then I did another year. We set another year, and by my fourth or fifth year, it's like, okay, this is way too good of an opportunity. We're growing as professionals, and again, going back to the culture and the values of Nebraska and Omaha, I think those are things that I appreciated. And cost of living and no traffic. So, so there's a lot of things. The two things that I miss from Miami that I wish were in Omaha is family and beaches. And in that order. So those are kind of the two things that kept me here in Omaha after, going back to Miami and kickstarting my career in education, and then opening my eyes to, kind of non-traditional education. What could be available in the community, or what could be done in the community.
Thank you. And you've worked in a few other community organizations, not-for-profit organizations, but you're currently the executive director of the Latino Center of the Midlands. Can you tell me a little bit about the Latino Center, please?
Yeah, so the Latino Center, and just to back up, when I landed in Omaha some years ago, there was not, and there still, is not a real strong representation of Latinos in professional jobs, in management and leadership. Not that there is zero, but it's not proportionate to the population. So through, just asking questions, who's focused on Latino issues? It's a small pocket of the community that is growing exponentially. That's where I became familiar with the Latino Center of the Midlands, 10 years ago, and became instantly a fan. And the Latino Center of the Midlands back then was a 40-year-old organization, originated as a Chicano Awareness Center, primarily serving the Chicano community, and it was born out of an interest to preserve the culture. Sorry about that. It was born in the spirit of preserving the culture, the arts, figuring out ways to provide greater support to the Spanish-speaking immigrant community and Chicanos, that are longstanding Americans. So the organization was born, and through focusing on culture and literacy, ESL classes, and a host of different things, the organization evolved to support the community based on the community needs, the specific needs at the time. So in the 80s, there was a lack of quality childcare options. So the Chicano Awareness Center added it to the repertoire, and then hosted a Head Start Center and provided coordination. And then eventually it spun into its own thing. And then, and then the Latino Center evolved to next iterations. And they did that. We've been doing that for 50 years. And the current focus lies in 3 program areas. Now related to COVID, the most important and kind of the cornerstone of the organization is our family, community, and well-being program. And that's a program area where an individual can come in with a host of different issues, seeking any kind, different types of resources, from immigration to rent assistance to housing to food. And we provide support to connect the families with whatever resources they're seeking. That's family, community, well-being. Another kind of cornerstone that's been with the organization for a long time is our workforce education and innovation program. And that's a program area that addresses adult basic education. So we have a GED program that's in Spanish. We have ESL classes, we have literacy classes, we have computer classes, and it's serving the individuals who want to skill up and who want to earn greater income and want to have more skills. We recently added to the education piece the workforce component. we noticed that we were doing workforce programming peppered through all the different program areas. So we said, let's have a more deliberate approach to the workforce programming and do a program, and add it to a program area where there can be the infrastructure to really support advancing, kind of those goals. We added a custom internship program for youth. We're, on the speaking circuit, and we do a lot of work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's a program area that this year we have been developing, and we're going to develop it further because we really see that there's a tremendous opportunity to close that gap that I mentioned early on of, there's a lot of Latinos, but we're all the professional class, higher income Latinos. And how can we support the generation of youth right now and position them so that as they continue to expand, they have not only the education, but they also have the network and the social capital in order to, be, in more prosperous positions in the community. And the last program area for the Latino Center of the Midlands is Pathways to Success. And Pathways to Success is our youth program where we operate in seven different schools, 4 middle schools or 4 high schools. No, I'm sorry, 5 high schools and 2 middle schools in 3 districts. And that's a program area that we support youth who are not attending school regularly. And the whole purpose of it is to help them graduate on time. And what the purpose of this program and what we have found in this program is that the kids aren't not attending school because they are disengaged and don't want to be at school. For sure, there's students like that, but we are also finding that based on their life circumstances of being having to contribute a household income and having jobs where they work late into the night, it makes it difficult for them to then get up and be 100% engaged in school. Or they are, not the principal caregivers for their siblings, but they are a one that is very much relied on. And when a sibling is sick, they have to stay home from school. And when a sibling, when there's a lot of responsibilities that fall on them, that make their circumstances a little bit more complex than a regular kid. So in any case, our Pathways to Success program, we pair students with a student advocate that they kind of serve a role as a mentor, social worker, liaison between the parents and the schools, or juvenile justice and the school and the parents, and they really help the kid problem solve and connect the family with resources. And that program has a component that has a 2-generation approach. So we're working with the kid and we're working with the parents, so that there's not a gap of information of what the expectations are with the kids and expecting for the kid to communicate to the parent that, hey, we need to have a different system when my little sister gets sick. I can't continue to miss school. So we help kind of in that approach, and we do a different programming to make sure that the parents understand how they can best support their kids, within the United States education system.
Great programs. And you have most of these programs, there's some at schools, but most of these programs are at your main building. How many people you have there every day on average?
Yeah, well, because of COVID, that ratio has changed entirely. So right now, we're only seeing people by appointment only. We're only holding 3 people in the waiting area at the same time. And it's only specific cases, like most nonprofits and other organizations. We've created new structures and systems, and where a lot of the things that we did before in person are now being done virtually, over FaceTime and Zoom and et cetera. So yeah. So on a daily average right now, we may see 20 to 25 people physically at the center. The majority of our work is site-based. So in our youth program, we are entrenched in the schools. We're physically at the schools, meeting with the kids at the schools. And then we have, other programming that has us out in the community doing different things.
And before COVID, how many people you had in a normal day at the building? at your main building?
Yeah, the range would vary on heavier days. So we host, so let's say at pre-COVID, on a given Thursday, we'd have a couple of classes, adult education classes going with, let's say, 15 participants each, and then let's say a couple of group sessions going with another 15 in those. So we're talking, about 60 people just in that. And that's not including walk-ins, people that are coming in and asking for support for employment, food pantry, anything. So add another, maybe 20 people to the mix. So, somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 people on a daily basis, on our heaviest days. And you compare that maybe to Fridays, which are typically slower days, just much less activity. But then we make up for that Friday on Saturdays with classes. So, we do a Saturday mornings, we did classes, Saturday mornings to early afternoons. We have classes for the people that we serve.
Mm-hmm. And in this context of helping others and the community work, when did you first learn about COVID-19 and how?
Great question.
Okay.
I imagine I don't recall the exact time that I learned about COVID. In general, I imagine it was probably early on when it was in Asia, when it was discovered there and there's something happening there and it wasn't a big deal. It's, it's over there and not here. I vividly do remember, I think it was March 9th or so, when COVID was announced to be present in Omaha. And the reason it was so, it's vivid and it'll remain vivid is because we were going to be hosting celebrations for the high achieving high school students. So we're doing the ASE awards. So award recognizing Hispanic youth who have a 3.0 or better GPA. And we were expecting to celebrate at Bryan High School at a high school's auditorium, and we're expecting in the neighborhood of 2,500 people. And so this was supposed to be on Sunday, and on the Friday, and COVID appeared in Omaha on a Friday, and 3 days later we had to be hosting 2,500 people. It was very early on; people didn't really know the extent of it or anything. And it was kind of painstaking to make that decision and make the call because a lot of people had put in a lot of work to host a celebration that was, it's a for one, it's a great celebration for the students' achievement. Two, it's a source of pride for the families that attend this event. Three, the kids, have worked so hard. So we did not want to call it off. But through conversations with the director of health from Douglas County and the superintendent of Omaha Public Schools, and the funders who provided the resources to host this event, everybody was there was alignment between the thinking of, yeah, let's better be safe than sorry. Let's figure out a different way. So we ended up celebrating the students in a different way through presenting them with the certificates and awards and doing some social media stuff. But going back to your question about COVID, that to me was when COVID was real, when it was in Omaha. That's what really just changed everything. Now I see life as before COVID and after COVID.
Was at that moment that you realized that this was a serious thing, or it was later?
No, it was right then and there. I was an early adopter of the seriousness of this. Health and well-being is a deep interest of mine, and having served on the Douglas County Board of Health, and having, read and watched documentaries and listened to podcasts, just leading up to this, I think I knew enough to take it serious, and from the get-go, it felt very uncomfortable. This idea of this new, new illness that was affecting people, and there's not a lot of information, and there's not a cure, and there's not a vaccine. So I think from the jump, I was very concerned.
And as when you started working from home, what did you do with the people that you work with at the Latino Center? Did you send them home? How did it work?
Yeah, we moved pretty fast with the Latino Center. You know, again, and for parts of it, I was the crazy one at work saying, "Hey, people, this is serious." You know, so it took a little bit of convincing for my leadership team to understand the magnitude of what we were dealing with here. So yeah, I'm sorry. What's the question? I spooked myself.
No, don't worry. When did you said we're closing?
Yeah,
we're moving online. You can work from home.
Pretty much instantaneously, we started to work on mapping it out. What is this going to look like? What programs are we going to offer? You know, let's take the next 2 weeks to take a step back and send everybody home while we figure this out. You know, and obviously we gave our staff the go ahead to continue the work that they're doing remotely, but you're going to be doing it from home while we figure out what needs to happen at the Latino Center. I believe there was about a week. I believe we came back to, that following week to gather our belongings, have conversations on, through the different leadership teams, and then with the staff that work directly with clients and students, to kind of come up with some game planning, knowing that the following week, hey, everybody's home. We're going to figure this out. Let's, and that's what we did. So we were pretty early to take a step back. And pretty, instantly I found myself part of committees and advisory groups with the core leadership group of the city. So being on the mayor's council, mayor's COVID advisory council kept me pretty informed about, the latest developments and the trends and what they were seeing. My previous experience on the Douglas County Board of Health as a board member helped me have access to information very quickly. So those are the things that helped me understand the magnitude of this, and then translate that to the staff members so that they understood the seriousness of it. So that it's not just me, fear mongering, but that there's actual data behind this stuff. And some of those early reports were incredibly grim. They were talking, I'm like, 1 in 4 people are going to be gone, in a year because of this. So early on, when they were still looking, when they were looking at the rates with what was happening in Italy, thankfully so far it has not been as grim in terms of volume in Douglas County, or in the state. But we still don't want to lose anybody. We still don't want people to have long-term health implications because they caught this this virus that has an uncertain trajectory and aftermath in your body. So yeah.
And what was the reaction of the people you work, not the people you work with as in the center, but the people that goes to the center every day to the ESL classes, how they reacted?
Yeah, there was a mixed bag. I think you would see people that already had some kind of awareness that were like, oh yeah, we need to protect ourselves. Some just lack of knowledge, like they just didn't know. They're like, yeah, it's just a cold, what's the big hubbub about? So I think you saw mixed responses. We saw mixed responses from people early on, and very early on, we were advocating for wearing masks. We were advocating for social distancing, and we're churning out materials in Spanish because they were non-existent. And then we were advocating in some of the different groups that I was participating in and offering, saying, hey, you know, we can help translate documents. So we did some of those things to make sure that the information from other partners was getting out, you know, and they've been able to solve for that and figure out that infrastructure. But early on, you know, we were translating documents and we were helping inform and you know, we did an assessment, we did a needs assessment within 3 weeks, so that we can understand what are the concerns and what are the needs, so then we can pivot where we can in order to meet those needs. And then we shared that document with the broader community. We shared it with the funding community, we shared it with the business community, we shared it with government, with local government. We shared it with all the constituents so that they can kind of get a representation. You know, we had 600 respondents in 4 days, so that they can understand what are the concerns, the major concerns. And out of that, we've been able to develop programming and advise others on programmings that were highest in need, so that, you know, we can do what our fair share for the Latino community.
And you mentioned at some point that at least one of your programs moved or changed due to COVID-19. Is there any other changes? What kind of changes the Latino Center went through in this last 3 or 4 months in terms of new programs or delaying funding or anything?
Yeah, I would say in some respects, the organization is unrecognizable to where it was before COVID. You know, one of our core areas, one of our values as an organization is family, you know, and family, you know, we know family, you know, loves on each other, and we spend time together and we eat together. So us as a staff, you know, we haven't been doing that. We haven't, you know, we haven't been bringing in cake de tres leches to celebrate somebody's birthday as a family, as a work family, you know. So, you know, from a working standpoint, there's just more space between us. Getting things done over Zoom is not nearly as productive as all being in the same room. So, you know, so those are the things that we've had to adjust to. And I think we've done a great job of adjusting to. You know, it's just like anything, the more we do it, the easier it becomes. So from a work, like a staffing and what we're doing on a day-to-day basis is unrecognizable. There's not the same volume of staff members at the center. You know, we have staggered days where different folks are coming in, and, you know, so that we're protecting each other. So just from you know, passing people in the hall and being like, hey, what's going on? You know, catching up. That's not happening. And I think a lot of those informal opportunities were great opportunities, not only to build relationships, but also to touch base on different projects and programs and cross-pollinate and say, oh, you know, I have this, you know, program or project or whatever, and, you know, let's, you know, plug in your kid. I remember you told me you had a kid that was really interested in this kind of stuff, and, you know, so I think some of those things are being a little bit more challenged. From, you know, our door was a revolving door. There was people coming in and out every, you know, at all times of the day. We were open from 8 to 8, and now, like I said, it's by appointment only, and the appointments, you know, are 9 to 4, and so the volume is decreased in person, and that family connection. We're working with immigrants that don't maybe have the experience or knowledge on how to easily access technology. They don't have the hardware, and then when they do have the hardware, then there's some learning that needs to happen to be able to appropriately use the devices. And that's, you know, one of the things that we're trying to we've been figuring out is how to support that learning. You know, this is how to, you know, access technology, so that you can, you know, be in our Google Classroom and do you know, and continue your studies. But there's that learning curve, you know, and inherent challenges that come with that.
Yeah, but you created a specific program, or you changed a specific program.
Several. But we're in different spaces now. You know, we're doing more work. So in some ways, we're doing more of the same. So we're you know, the virus has increased the need, and thus has increased it our responsibility to respond to it. And then we've created new custom programming to kind of address it, or new activities. So in terms of activities, we've done several food, hygiene, and mask drives where we have opened it up to the public and say, all right, here's a drive-through. We've sourced masks, hygiene products, and food, perishable and non-perishable, from different partners. We've seen a tremendous, I definitely don't want to give the impression that it's been us. This is all very much so in our partnership network with organizations like Girls Inc. and Together and North Star Foundation and a variety of different folks, Omaha Public Schools, YMCA, to secure these items and then be able to make them available to the public, by a trusted source where they may feel a little bit more comfortable than going to a location in a different part of the city that they don't feel comfortable. We try to ease that, and we don't want to now make that our permanent work, but we want to provide that guidance that it's okay to come in and get these foodstuffs or masks or hygiene product or hygiene kits. We want to make it socially acceptable. Latinos are proud people, and they're not, they're proud people by nature. So we want to make it just socially like it's okay, and then be able to provide a stepping stone. Okay, so this time it was us and we connected you with this, but the next one, we're partnering with this group and they're the ones that are doing the heavy lifting. So that's kind of one space that we're doing more work in. Another complete custom program in response to COVID is a Siembra Nebraska program, where we're addressing food insecurity and employment security, and we created an internship program where youth are growing food in new areas of the city, and they're using that food to then distribute it to the community. The interns are being paid. They're not only learning self-sufficiency of growing food and things of that nature, but they're also learning community, how to they're going through the lifespan of food distribution. So they're starting from scratch on distributing the food, and they're taking ownership of 3 food drives that are coming up in September. So they're going through that whole process, and our goal and we're really excited how serious the youth are taking it. We are employing 15 youth, and again, we're doing this in partnership with several key incredible partners. The Big Garden, Omaha Public Schools, they're offering a greenhouse. Southside Redevelopment is offering land, as is Kids Can is offering land, and Saving Grace Perishable Food Pantry is offering logistics for food distribution. The Croc Center is housing the kids. So again, I want to make sure that anybody who's watching this, a takeaway is like, this isn't us. We're not just saying, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. This is very much the reason that we've been able to make the impact that we have is through the partnerships that we have had longstanding, that we've deepened those partnerships, and new ones that we have cultivated as a result of this. So the Siembra Nebraska program, it's a pilot program. We're not trying to solve we can't expect to be solving everything related to COVID through this project. But it's a good starting point. And then we see the potential for significant expansion next year to help, again, the food insecurity and the employment insecurity is not going anywhere, unfortunately. Just like the virus isn't really going anywhere for the foreseeable future, neither are those twin challenges. And we're really excited about this project, and bringing the community together and working on something that I think is pretty innovative and creative.
So no, that's actually a great program. You mentioned that the food insecurity, the lack of jobs, or the job security, or job insecurity had impacted strongly the Latino community in Omaha. What else? What other impacts have you seen in the Latino community?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no shortage of them. It's all of the disparities that existed before, are exponentially magnified through this. The economic consequences of not being able to work or being forced to work, not forced, not having an option. Nobody's really, it's hard to force somebody to work. But from an economic standpoint, if you're not working and you're not earning, and you're living in the shadows and you're not qualifying, for unemployment benefits, your options are pretty slim. From the technological divide is pretty significant. I think that's going to be alleviated a little bit now with the deployment of iPads for remote learning throughout Omaha public schools. So each household theoretically now that has a young person that's in Omaha public schools, at least each household will have a Wi-Fi, enabled device in an iPad. So I think that's going to help close the digital divide. And the reason I say digital divide is because, COVID, although I may be seeing family more frequently through FaceTime, because of COVID, I was already doing that before. And, as people that don't live, in the same city as their families, going through a pandemic, being able to see somebody's emotions on a screen is a little bit more impactful and comforting than just being on the phone with a relative in a Central or Latin, somewhere in Latin America. So that digital, the economic is just devastating for some families. We've had families in our program, we had a family member, from our program, a woman in her 50s that succumbed to the disease. And it wasn't because she didn't take all of the precautionary measures. She wore the mask, she practiced social distancing. The unfortunate nature, or the unfortunate part of her situation is that, she lived with somebody, her son-in-law, who worked in meatpacking, and he developed he got the virus, and then as a result she got it, and she ended up passing away. So then, there's life lost, there's the grief, and then the financial implication of burying someone and getting their body to their home country and all of those things. So on top of the grief, on top of the economic stress, on top of the anxiety and insecurities, now we're having to figure out logistics on how to take the remains of our parent to rest. And that's not the only example. But those are some of the things that that maybe aren't revealed, which is it's like all of these things happening at the same time. And if it's not one thing, it's another. I was liking this just this situation to mood swings. Us as an organization, based on our needs, we're able to raise money to kind of help provide some solutions, but then other issues happen that we then have to now, we were feeling like we were trending in the right direction because we're able to kind of help solve for some of these things, but then there's these other problems that happen, and now we're like, again, we're uneasy and frustrated because now we have to add something, we have to figure something out here. Yeah, and it's just going to get more challenging as school is now going virtual, and the households where parents have to work, and they're, people are talking about leaving their 10-year-olds at home while they work and then coming in and checking on them on lunch, so, and again, this is not a Latino issue, this is an everybody issue. But socioeconomically, I imagine things are going to become, so to me, it's not Latino, it's not African American, it's not Asian, it's not Caucasian. I think it's socioeconomic. Those who can work from home and who have the means are going to be able to be okay. Those who are deemed essential workers are going to be more at risk, and there's just going to be more complications. And I you know, it's pretty dire. It's over. You know, I'm understating it. You know, completely. It's a complete challenge all the way around.
And you mentioned that this is something that, and I agree that it's going to impact everyone, but there's some that might be more privileged, have less impact, and others will have a greater impact. The Latino community in Omaha, from your experience, will be among those who will be a greater impact, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Latino community for sure is more exposed. If you look at the, you know, propensity of restaurants, you know, I don't know, I haven't been to a restaurant, yeah, since pre-COVID, or since COVID came. But if you look at that sector, you know, you look at the wait staff, the busing staff, the, you know, the kitchen staff, high propensity of Latinos. You look at meat packing, high propensity of Latino, and where the folks working in food processing, where they themselves may not feel the economic burden, when a family member in their household passes away or becomes ill, that's when they feel the economic burden, because they are exposed, because they are at work, and then a family member, and then where's the relief for that worker and that to help with their family members, because, you know, it's they became infected at work, but that's not being taken into account. So there is no, you know, there is no support for in that way. And Latinos, you know, so the food service industry, the meatpacking industry, construction is another industry, you know, so again, it's very, there's higher exposure, you know, and then, you know, add in those who are working on becoming legal citizens that are not quite there yet. You know, they have no financial way to survive. You know, there is no, you know, $600 unemployment check coming, you know, regularly to them. They're, you know, so that's another thing. And where the you know, majority of the family may have been born in the United States, potentially the primary breadwinner has been working in the shadows, and now that well has dried up. So what resources are available to help with, you know, rent, food, utilities, you know, and that's where, you know, the Latino Center and other funds like the Angel Fund and Lending Link and you know, today I was on the phone with the United Way, and they're making, you know, they're you know, received a $1 million grant to support in some of those areas. So yeah, so, and again, it's yes, Latinos are going to be disproportionately affected, but it's not a Latino issue. I think it's more, you know, people, the socioeconomics, the economics of this is what really is the driver for those who are going to look back in 5 years and be like, man, that was a crazy time, to those that in 5 years are still going to be impacted economically, psychologically, physically, you know. It's going to be, I feel privileged to be in the position that I'm in, to be able to help solve for some of the things that are coming, that are currently happening and are going to be happening online. And the Latino Center staff is doing an amazing job of problem solving and putting all of their energy into figuring out how to support families right now.
Thanks. And the Latino Center of the Midlands is located in probably the main street of Latino small businesses. And you've been back to the office. You mentioned that and we know that that COVID-19 has had an enormous impact on small businesses. Mm-hmm. Have you seen any changes in that street? So we're talking about 4 or 5 blocks that it's full of small businesses. Have you seen any changes in that street?
There, you know, there's lower, the traffic is lower, you know, there's not the same foot traffic, you know, there's a for rent sign across the street from where we're at. changes, just in terms of changes, I see a ton, if not 100% of people wearing masks. And kind of a footnote for those not familiar with Omaha and where the Latino Center is, we're in area code 68107, which is considered the hot zone. We're a stone's throw away from major meatpacking facilities, and it's a densely populated area where people live, play, and are entertained in a very densely packed area, which was kind of, from an urban development standpoint, you have everything you need within close proximity. So it was very desirable, but now kind of some of those attributes are not as desirable because everything is in one location. There's the businesses are being affected, and if there's less businesses, there's less attraction, so it's kind of a snowball. So those are some of the things. It looks not quite a ghost town, but the numbers are significantly down. There's less vendors with their goods on on the street, and there's just less activity.
A couple of minutes ago, you mentioned that there are some people that in 5 years we're going to remember this as that crazy time, and others were going to still be suffering. In terms of the organizations that work with Latinos in South Omaha and in Omaha, and in terms of the Latino community in general, what are your main concerns for the future? So for the after COVID-19 era?
Yeah, so recovery or after, whenever, if and when that time comes, that there's an after a vaccine and all of that, which I desperately hope there is. I think we're going to have to take a serious look and make some, take some innovative approaches to the learning loss that's going to happen. Again, for those families that don't really have the resources, the background in order to help their kids be virtual learners. So there's going to have to be a lot of catch up. There's going to have to be a strong sense of overcoming this, and that's going to have to come from the parents and from the kids, that they're going to have to recognize that we can't just erase 2 years from our life where we were not able to maximize our learning through formal education. We can't pretend that there's not going to be a disadvantage for that. Let's say a fifth grader, let's say they spend all of their fifth grade trying to learn, and then they transition to sixth grade trying to learn in a household where there's not a lot of support and resources just because of the nature of the environment that they live in. And then you compare that to the kid with a stay-home parent or a nanny. Those two kids are, in 10 years, are going to be competing in the marketplace for employment, for college scholarships. We cannot pretend that kid is going to have the same capacity as the kid that the learning has continued and advanced. So I don't know the answers yet, but what's going to happen to those kids that lose, let's say, 2 years of learning, and how are we going to catch them up? And fundamentally, not just credits, not just become a paper mill and say, okay, you passed because you attended every Zoom session, but really fundamentally what they're learning, the curriculum, the reading, writing, arithmetic. How are we going to close that gap? I think that's going to be one of the main questions that we're going to have to figure out, with the school system and with higher education and with community nonprofit groups. How are we going to make that up? I don't know what the answer to that is yet. I don't know if people are thinking that far ahead, but 10 years down the road, are we going to have, a significant number of wasted talent because of the learning loss? And I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe people are going to be well adapted and they're going to be on the computer from right now. The expectation is from 8 to 4, every kid on an iPad. I don't know how time will tell how many kids and families are going to be able to continue the same rate of learning as if it would have, as to their peers, as to their maybe more resource-rich peers. From what I have experienced in education, the existing gap is going to only grow further. And that's what worries me the most about, a lost generation. Because it could take, we could be doing this for the next school year, and that'll be a year and a half of a school year lost. It could be for another 2 years. Who knows? Nobody really knows. But I think that's going to be one of the main questions we need to figure out in the future is how do we make up for lost time of learning? And this is not a shot at public education. This isn't a shot at anybody. This is just the reality that we're living in. There's just too many variables that kids that were already not on grade level are going to be further behind.
Yeah, I agree. And from the perspective of a college faculty, that is also something that worries me, and how we help the students once they get to college, and that, that college will be a possibility for them as well.
Sure.
So I have one more question that I want to ask, and it's from a more personal perspective. How has COVID-19 impacted you and your family? Your parents live in Miami, that it's a hot spot, or has been a hot spot for a while. How have you lived this?
Yeah. For one, very privileged, all things considered. So for my wife and I, it's just work, figure things out, Zoom calls, phone calls, meetings. So we've been able to, so we're very privileged because we get to work, which is, and we both enjoy our work. We like we like the responsibility. We feel like we have lived experience to be good at what we do. So for us, our workload has increased substantially in different ways. So we're not doing the same things. I was gearing up for a capital campaign, and I was going to be on the capital campaign trail this year and talking to the funders and trying to, position the organization to have the infrastructure that we need for another 50 years. But instead, it's trying to solve, the basic needs that are now families desperately need. So my work has shifted from being proactive, and playing a lot of offense, and getting things teed up for us to be able to, do a $5 million capital campaign, to now taking steps back and being like, yeah, capital campaign, like there's zero need for us to do this. We need to be focusing all of our resources on addressing basic needs, continuing to engage the community, continuing to provide leadership, and making sure that people feel that they have champions that are trying to solve for their unique issues as Latinos and immigrants. For me, it's the balancing act of trying to parent and trying to do this work, and feeling like I'm not doing either one great, because I'm interrupted by children, and I'm, being a horrible dad, because of the workload, and I'm on shorter, I have less patience because I'm like stressed out because of all these compounding factors and because of work and all this stuff. So, but again, I'm privileged because I get to work and I get to solve for it, and I get to, come up with new strategies. And, if I need to spend money that I didn't plan on spending to have childcare in a different way, then I'm able to do that, where a lot of people don't. And I guess that's what, challenges me to continue to do this work is, I have it nice. I have, and I have it nice, comparatively. My wife and I, have been working like crazy people all the time. And she was supposed to be off all summer, and she's been working all summer as a principal. She was supposed to have a month off and has not taken an hour off. the relationship, one of the silver linings that I understand that comes from a place of privilege is the spending more time with my kids. So on one end, it's incredibly stressful and challenging, but then as I take a step back and I reflect and I think of, wow, I'm spending so much time with my kids. I'm actually watching them grow up and hit these developmental milestones in a way that was not possible before. So I get to see that, and I don't hate it. I adore my kids, and to be able to spend more time with them, and to figure out better systems so that we can kind of manage through this and be the parents that we want to be and be the workers that we want to be. That is kind of the name of the game, is continuing, different iterations to figure out how can we do a better job at being us in the positions that we're in, and most importantly, being parents.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. It's the same things that I've been going through since March. On that note, again, I want to thank you for participating in this interview, for letting me talk to you about your experience as a leader, community leader in these difficult times. Is there anything that you'd like to share with me, or any questions that I haven't asked that you'd like to share at this moment?
Yeah, I think, hope right now is difficult to come by for many. For me, hope, seeing it from a different lens, for me, I'm hopeful that we're able to look back and see that, we made the right choices, we made the right calls, and where we didn't make the right calls, we were able to course correct as quickly as identifying those things. But I guess for me, it's just a hope for the future, that we're able to learn from this. There's going to be a different world on the other side of this. Like everybody that I talk to says the same thing. Education is going to be forever changed. Industries are going to be forever impacted. And I'm just hopeful that once, we get through this, there's just utopia on the other end of this. That the infighting stops, and some of the things that were thought to be super important, that were more ideologies and bigotry and prejudice, that a lot of those things are put to the side because we as a world, and as a community, we're able to kind of push through and take care of everybody. And that's I guess my hope for the future is that we're able to power through this and be better as a result. I know I've learned a lot from my mistakes and from challenging experiences in my life, and I'm hoping that there's this world consciousness is able to kind of have the same type of metamorphosis. And one last thing, and because this is going to be like put in different places. Mami, te quiero mucho, gracias por todo. Agradezco todo lo que me has, everything you've done for me my whole life.
Thanks. That was wonderful. So thank you very much, and that's it with the interview. I'm going to stop recording.